Eric Kussin is here with me, and I'm so excited for this conversation. Eric is the founder and CEO of SameHere Global, a nonprofit movement reshaping the way the world talks about mental health. After a 20-year career as a professional sports exec, Eric's life took a dramatic turn when he faced a debilitating mental health crisis that left him nearly bedridden for over 2 years. Through a journey of holistic healing, he reclaimed his well-being and launched SameHere to promote the idea that mental health challenges are universal, not the experience of only a few. His 5 in 5 philosophy emphasizes that mental health affects everyone, advocating for community, transparency, and root cause healing over the outdated cultural narratives that we all know too well. Eric, I'm so honored to have you here with me. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, speaking to me from Israel.
Yeah, I came across your story. It resonated with me immediately. And you are so clearly someone who's turned your pain into purpose. So, why don't we start out with your personal journey from thriving sports executive to facing this mental health crisis? What happened? Can you give us like the play by play, how it happened, and what that looked like?
I'm laughing when you say the play-by-play. One, because it's a sports analogy, so maybe that just like popped in your mind naturally. But two, because like a whole episode could be based on the story, and I don't want to weigh down the conversation with it. So I'll try to give like the 5-minute Cliff Notes version of it, as opposed to going into too much detail. But like you said, athlete growing up, then sports executive, living my dream job, traveling to Chicago, Phoenix, New Jersey, then down in Florida, was the chief revenue officer of the Florida Panthers. So it's partially NBA, partially NHL teams. And at the time when my mental health crash, I call it, happened, situationally, I'm a single guy living in South Beach, making the highest salary I'd made at that point, one step away from my dream job of being team president. So everything situationally was where it should be. And I think that context is important because we often think when someone goes through a mental health challenge, it's because this awful thing right then and there happened in their life. And that cause and effect this thing to happen. My brain just started shutting down on me over a 2-week period. And I didn't know where it came from. I felt like it came out of nowhere. I couldn't put sentences together, have conversations with people in normal flow. Concentrating on work became difficult. I felt like I had lead blocks on my feet and like I was pushing myself out of quicksand to get out of bed. And my team owner was extremely supportive at the time, military guy. So it makes sense. It's 2015 we're talking about. So it was before people were really talking about mental health openly, but because he had that background, I'm assuming that's why he gave me the leeway that he did. And he said, take as much time as you need, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, come back, hit the ground running. And so when I heard 3 months, when you talked about cultural norms in the intro, look, what I knew about mental health, I didn't know at the time, do I have a brain tumor? Do I have a traumatic brain injury from playing sports? I didn't know what was wrong in my brain. I just knew this is what we think about in the Northeast. You're San Diego based. Northeast, we're very cocky about who our doctors are. So we think it's the Harvard trained and Columbia trained and Cornell trained and Dartmouth trained doctors that we're going to go get the best help from. Even though we were living in Florida, he's a New York based guy. He's go back up to New York and get the best help that you can need. You'll find what's wrong and come back and hit the ground running. So those cultural norms that I was thinking was, I've got a chemical imbalance. If it's not a brain tumor or traumatic brain injury, I've got this chemical imbalance thing and I need chemicals put in my brain in the right way to balance out the imbalance. And when you think about why that norm is there, like one of the early trainings we get as kids is you get strep throat, bronchitis, pneumonia. Okay, what fixes you right away? An antibiotic. In 2 or 3 days, you're right back into school after feeling awful, like your throat has razors in it or like you're coughing out a lung. Now you feel great. So why wouldn't it make sense then if your brain doesn't feel right and they give you this label of what's wrong with you, you find the right medication that fixes that label. And then what gets sold to you is it may take 4 to 6 weeks for the medication to kick in and the first one may not work and you may need to combine multiple together. P.S. 2.5 years of my life were spent trying to find the right combinations of psychotropic drugs because all these doctors were telling me melancholic depression, anhedonic depression, PTSD, OCD, ADHD. And so when you're given all these different labels and you think even within that, like as you're reacting, your issue may not be serotonin, it might be dopamine. So we got to give you Wellbutrin instead of the other SSRI.
And all of this is happening without anyone ever taking one blood test, looking at your microbiome. Nobody's looking inside of your brain. It's literally taking your car to get fixed and nobody opens the hood. So there you are in 2015 having the breakdown of your life, not knowing why. And then you're told by 5 different doctors, you have 5 different disorders. You need 5 different medications.
The issue was 5 different medications.
Did it turn into 50 for you?
50, yeah, 52. And the level of dysfunction, it's hard. Like now when people see me talk or they see me communicate, they see I'm an animated person, it almost sounds like I'm being hyperbolic with it. I did not move from my bed for 2.5 years, but for going to a doctor, being dragged to it. I needed to be reminded to eat every day. And it sounds almost like you were catered and waited to. My parents are both teachers. I had a modest house. I had a twin bed that I'm still living in from the time I was a little kid. As my mom is bringing me like soup in the morning, so I have something easy to eat, and then like pasta at night, because I didn't even think to eat. I didn't watch TV. I didn't listen to podcasts. I literally stared at the ceiling all day because there was nothing running through my brain.
It sounds so painful. And you know what? I also want to acknowledge like the fact that when someone's suffering from a mental health issue like this, that you'd even have to think that you would sound spoiled or sound catered to, right? If someone had cancer and they said, I stayed in my bed for 2.5 years, nobody would say, oh, you're so catered to. But that's how bad your brain was. Literally, your brain and body and spirit was literally not functioning.
It was that. So you nailed it in terms of the reason for feeling that is because my brain wasn't functioning. So I'm putting that out there, trying to justify it. I also had, and they're no longer friends, but there were two guys that I was friendly with. I lived in Arizona and was on a text message thread with them. And towards like end of year 2, when I finally was able to start texting a little bit, one of them made a comment, hey, I think the reason why it's been so long is because you're just being coddled. And maybe if your parents threw you out in the street and made you have to live on your own, you'd be able to get through this. And I was like, dude, Mike, you don't know what it's like to be this dysfunctional. And I tried to play it off in a joking way to get him to understand. And people don't realize how debilitating, which we can get into the science of polyvagal. I didn't know that at the time. That's what I was dealing with, was a shutdown of my nervous system, of like metabolic conservation and trying to make sure that I don't spin even more out of control. But I was in a place where my brain would not function. If I was put out on the street, I would die. When we see people who are homeless and they have nothing but a sign written in front of them, it's because that's all they have to give at that time. And you're thinking, why is this person not asking in a friendly way for money?
That sign is like a near impossible feat when you're not functioning. Just writing a word, my heart just goes out to you because it sounds so unbelievable. You literally went from the peak of your functioning to the opposite.
Yeah. When I was in Florida, that 2-week period, I'd be driving to work and be like, I haven't eaten anything in a day and a half. Let me drive to Dunkin' Donuts and get egg and cheese sandwich. And it was almost like it was like a force field in a way like that. Can I get over this obstacle of going to the drive-through to order what I need to order, just to put something in my body so that I have some kind of fuel because I haven't eaten in a day and a half? And you're doing that while you're also trying to pretend like you're okay in an office that you're trying to manage a staff with, hiding behind the door a little bit, but also wanting to appear like you have everything together. Because if I lose my job, what is my identity? What is my purpose? Where's my salary coming from? So that was 2.5 years of hell. What I think will resonate with people is I'm eventually told that the software changes aren't good enough, meaning the neurotransmitters. And for folks who I'm sure you've shared on your show, how do we have a thought, feeling, emotion, behavior in our brain? We've got these neurons that I call it hungry hippo, like a presynaptic neuron. Okay, so a presynaptic neuron grabs neurotransmitters. We're electrochemical beings. It shoots those neurotransmitters across to the postsynaptic neuron, and that's where we have a thought, feeling, motion, behavior. That happens billions of times in our brains because of the billions of cells that we have in our brain. So what I was told was it must not be a neurochemical issue. It must be the hardware, not the software. So let's start working on the hardware. Let's do TMS therapy. So TMS is they shoot electromagnetic waves into your brain to try to wake up the neurons, is the way that it's explained. Okay. So I say this because here in the US, there's a pattern that you go down. It's usually not 52 that you try, but it's like, we're going to try a bunch of meds. Once you realize the meds aren't for you, then we're going to go to the next step. This is not the last step. This is the next step. TMS therapy. Why? Because it gets covered by insurance now. These clinics can buy the machines and finance them out. And okay, they can charge $350 per session.
So TMS, what does that stand for?
Transcranial magnetic stimulation. So there's two versions of it. One is it's a half moon shaped object, and they hit this thing called the motor threshold. When your thumb jumps, they believe they know they've hit the right place, and they target that area with electromagnetic waves for about a 30 to 45-minute process each day.
What is that? What was that like for you? Can you?
At the time, hopeful when I first started it, because I've tried the 52 meds, those haven't worked. So something new that isn't medication based, I'm like, oh, okay, let me try this. And I'm talking to the techs and asking them about it. And they're trained to say, we've seen miracles happen. So, okay, you put your blind faith in there. And what's interesting is I started getting worse as treatments went on. So they say you're supposed to do 30 treatments, roughly 30 days in a row. Like, these clinics are making so much money that they stay open 7 days a week. About the 15th treatment, when you ask me what is it like, the half moon became a full helmet. And I have a picture of it. I share it in my sessions when I talk. My face, with being on all those meds, is blown up, pushed into this mask like this, and it feels like someone is jackhammering your head, right? With these waves. Now, in fairness to, and I'm sure you feel the same way, different things work for different people. So I don't want to knock any type of treatment, but the way it was sold to me was this is going to fix you. All you got to do is wait for the 30 treatments. And if the half moon one isn't working well enough, the full helmet one will be your panacea.
So here you are dealing with the effects, call them, or side effects of all of these medications. You're swollen, your whole body, your whole brain, everything's inflamed. And now you have this painful thing happening to your head every day.
Yeah. And you don't look at the time, I didn't understand inflammation. I didn't understand. This is early in my journey, right?
Yep.
So it's 2016. So all I'm thinking is, oh, it makes sense that they tried the software things. They sold me. I'm not thinking sold, but like it makes sense that hardware may be the issue. So let me try this. And my best friend now and one of my doctor partners believes they were hitting this area of my brain called the cingulate, which is responsible for repetitive thought patterns, inflaming that area. That's a possibility. And or what we now know about the nervous system and heightened sympathetic nervous system response, could it have also been, I was told this was the next level of treatment, I'm not getting better. So was my brain going, I'm getting worse. Nothing's ever going to help me. Nothing's going to ever work for me. And so was that part of what was making me worse? But what
so
it
meaning
led,
because you were already feeling, because you were already feeling pessimistic, that this procedure expedited and reinforced the pessimism.
Yeah. How many people, they go to, let's say, a hospital or they get treatment somewhere and this is the new line treatment, or this is the latest in how we help people. And then they say it's going to take you 30 sessions. Okay, the first 5 sessions, you're not feeling any better, but you pass it off that it's early on. Well, then you get to the 15th, 20th session, and you're not only not feeling better, you may be even feeling worse.
So you were feeling worse after 15.
Yep.
You knew something was wrong. What did you do at that point?
According to the doctors, what am I supposed to do? Stay with it. That's stay with the 30 treatments. So the morning of the 24th day, I'm showing you this, like my butt is on my hands and my knees shaking because I'm in my room at 4 a.m. staring at a bottle of pills. And the way that I describe it is not, I thought of this, a thought came over me, which was swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle. And for those who are hearing that, you're talking to someone who loves life, loves living, has never looked at a bottle of pills as something that could hurt me before. I've always looked at a bottle of pills as you take one, you take it, it's supposed to help you for that 24-hour period, you put it away in the cupboard and you take one the next day.
You were literally compliant in every single way.
I did everything. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing drugs. By the way, also during that 2.5 years of hell, nothing bad situationally during that 2.5 year period had happened. So dog was still healthy, parents still alive. None of my grandparents had passed during that stretch. So I'm not thinking anything during that stretch. And yet my brain at this point is saying, do something to yourself, do something to yourself, do something to yourself. Something that I call impulsive error messages now, because it helps people understand when we hear about suicide that it's not an active decision or choice. It's something that's overcoming me that I can't stop the thought from. It's this magnetic pull towards self-harm to where I'm having to sit on my hands because I feel like if I let my hands just be, I'm going to reach at that pill and swallow that bottle. So I tell my parents this, and I was like, imagine actively saying to a family member, you need to take me to the hospital because I'm a threat to myself. Like most people, you get Baker Act in Florida, whatever it is, and you're forced in because you're a threat to yourself. I describe it to people so that there's a heads up on what suicidal ideations are, as your brain has 2 wrestlers that are in it. It's got a very strong wrestler that's trained, that's an Olympic champion, which is your limbic system going, do it over and over again. And then your prefrontal cortex is this weaker wrestler that hasn't been trained in wrestling, is trying to beat this stronger wrestler. You intuitively know with that weaker wrestler, you're like, how am I going to beat this behemoth of a person? I need help in order, like someone's got to tag in and go against this other wrestler with me, or I'm going to get taken down. And so I said to my parents, you got to take me to a psych ward. And so back to the same theme, it's Cornell Med, which is supposed to be the top treatment facility center in the Northeast. The attending psychiatrist is a Harvard-trained doctor, so it's another Ivy League doctor. And she looks at my chart, she looks at the 52 meds, she looks at the TMS therapy, and she literally says, you tried everything I have. The last resort is to do ECT. So she uses the term last resort. And when I first got sick, the last thing I thought I would ever do is have my brain shocked into seizure. And again, not knocking the people who've done the procedure, who believe that it's helped them, but that sounded like sci-fi to me. And these are the things we see in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I don't want to scare people in that type of way where you're seeing the electrodes put on the brain. But
it's very real. And how many people are helped by ECT?
I asked the doctor, how does this work? When I was on the table for my first treatment. So there's a different psychiatrist who's administering the ECT than the one who told me last resort. And he, like, in this rhythmic pattern, he goes, Eric, we don't know, right? And I was like, what do you mean you don't know? He's we tried ECT on epileptic patients back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, right? He said we wanted to reverse seizures. So we put people under general anesthesia and we shocked their brain to seizure. And it didn't reverse the seizures, but a large percentage of them reported a lift in mood. Now, as much as my brain was not working at that point, when I heard lift in mood, I'm thinking to myself, like, how do you measure that? What do you mean lift in mood? Like that someone on a scale of 1 to 10 said I went from a 5 to a 6? That's not much evidence. So essentially, for people who don't understand ECT, it's like your brain is a computer and they don't know what to do anymore. So they're going to hit the power button, turn it off, and then turn it back on, hoping that it's going to start to work again. Again, electrical currents working through your brain. So if we pass electrical currents through, it'll be a hard restart to your computer.
Okay. So another question, in that moment, did you know the risks of ECT?
No, they didn't explain any of the risks to me. If you proactively asked, they would say things like this. There's been some reports of short-term memory loss, but that's never been proven. That's essentially their line. Interesting you ask also about that stuff. I had been on Xanax by the doctors for the 2.5 years prior. Cornell doesn't believe in Xanax. They believe in Klonopin. They want the longer acting one that isn't an immediate hit right away. They cold turkey switched me the night I got in from Xanax to Klonopin, which some people think, oh, big deal. It's a benzo to a benzo. No, my body, the way that it reacted when I cold turkey switched after 2.5 years of one to another, like I was having these withdrawal like shakes in the middle of the night that felt like a heart attack, right? Like you don't know what's happening to you at that moment. So talk about when I was explaining the TMS thing, your sympathetic nervous system response going into heightened alert. Almost every step of the process of what I experienced in the hospital, from, oh, go get food, and they don't introduce you to people, they just tell you to walk into a cafeteria and other people who already know each other are sitting there. You feel like you're an alien. Like everything about the hospital experience and the psych ward experience, it's septic, it's cold, the beds are metal cots, like the furniture is this old wooden furniture. It's not like my brother had cancer twice. In the oncology wing, it's treated like it's a hotel. Like they want to comfort you. It's the opposite in a psych ward, right? So your cell phone's taken away from you. You could argue whether that's a good or a bad thing, but when you need comfort from other people and you can't get in touch with your loved ones, but for a call on a payphone to the floor, like that's not very comforting, right?
So people are in there, they're absolutely scared for their lives. They have no source of connection, nothing to comfort them, and their nervous systems are in absolute shock from the way they're treated and the way that these places are set up.
They believe two things: for the people who are suicidal to watch you until those suicidal ideations go away, and or to change your medications and watch over you while you're taking your medications. I know this because we train hospitals now on the mental health and behavioral health side of things. Most hospitals are not equipped to do anything other than medication management, watching you in a 24-hour hold if you're suicidal, or the occasional, there's a DBT group, there's a CBT group. There is no daily activities of giving people agency to learn mind body, to be educated, to start to work on yourself. And is that by design? I'll let people make that decision on their own. I certainly have my opinion. I'm sure you do as well. But that's the reality of what we're dealing with in the hospital setting. But I didn't know any better. So I thought I'm there to get these treatments. There's 30 other people are getting ECT. So there's no one for me to, I'm watching other people walking around in circles, talking to themselves.
Drooling? Were people drooling?
Drooling. There was a guy, like, I'm going to say this the right way, a white tank top. Okay, up with a silver chain, and he, for 24 hours a day, I don't think he ever slept, just walked in a circle. And you'd ask questions. There was one nurse assigned to him, like, how long has he been here? We don't talk about him. We don't ask him. Okay. So, like, when you're a patient and you're watching that on your floor, your mind is going, I might turn into that. Has that guy been here for 20 years, for 15 years, and he's never been able to leave? The fact that's not discussed, and it's on the same floor, what do you think is happening to the other patients as that's happening?
To witness something like that is so scary. And then you see that they're neglected, and it's that could literally happen to anyone. We could probably talk about the psych wards for a long time, but and at some point I want to get into the work you're doing now. So you're in the psych ward, you're now getting ECT. Tell us like what happened moving like at that point and then moving forward.
All right. So ECT, I'll skip over quickly, but let's just say you wake up, they ask you your name, what state you're in, what hospital in. You don't know any of the answers to those questions. They had to get 5 male nurses. They got used to me to hold me down. Because if they strapped me to the bed, it was a portable bed, my size, I'd flip the bed over. So they needed something with give, but also something with strength to hold me down. So they knew, because they would ask me those questions at the beginning, it would take me an hour to come to, I didn't know which my room was when they would roll me back from the ECT suite. My parents were nice enough that they would come and meet me there, but it took me an hour to get my bearings, and then finally I'd be able to have a conversation with them. So not surprisingly, I leave the hospital after 5 weeks and 12 sessions, no better than the 2.5 years, thinking my life is over unless Merck or Pfizer invents a miracle pill that treats this thing called treatment-resistant fill in the blank of whatever labels they've given me.
Treatment resistant. Yes, that is a very important keyword.
Yep, that's what they love, throwing that label around. Where the story changes, and then it'll help get into the work. So my parents, you'll like this being from Israel, like they would go to these continuing education courses at their temple. Okay. So this woman is teaching a course at their temple, and the course is integrative breathing practices. And I don't know what the term integrative means at the time. I've never done a breathing practice before. I'm not thinking about what this is going to be about, this course. And my mother runs back from the course at night. She was like speaking in partial sentence. She's like, my neck, it hurt. And I never go to these type of doctors, but we were just there for continuing education. And this woman made me breathe a certain way, and my neck is feeling better, and I can't explain it. Like, but she's a doctor and she treats people with mental health also. Can you please go see her? So yeah, okay, cool. So 3 days later, I go and I sit on her couch. And this is important for people to hear the difference of how she treated me versus traditionally what happens in medicine. She sits me down on her couch and she goes, all right, Eric, we got an hour together. I got one question for you. What's the story of your life as you tell it to yourself? That last part's important, as you tell it to yourself. She goes, and there's no rules when you share with me the story of your life. You could scream, you could curse, you could yell, you could look at the wall, you could punch a pillow. Like, whatever needs to come out of you, I want to hear the good, bad, the ugly. She doesn't start with what's bothering you, what are your symptoms. Nothing.
How much do I love her already?
If you met her, like, I'll introduce you. She's awesome. So good friend to this day. All right, I'm the middle of 3 boys, so I think very chronologically, and started like 4 years old and remember a toy that I got from my grandparent or something like that. And then eventually I get to 9 years old, and my older brother was 13 because he's 4 years older, my senior. And for the next 50 minutes of this session, I'm starting at age 9, and follow this. This goes from age 9 to me being age 24. So now, this is not all I shared, but this is to give you a 1-minute version of this. So my older brother breaks his femur bone in a sports accident, is put into a body cast for a year and homeschooled. Heals from that, goes back to school, gets diagnosed with ALL, which is a children's form of leukemia. 5 years of chemo and radiation in the late 80s and early 90s. Back then was not the best prognosis, but miracle, he goes into remission. A month later, he's in a Jeep Wrangler with his friends with an open top, no seatbelts in the back because like inspections on cars were not as highly managed back then. So my brother flies out of the back on the parkway right near our house. My mother gets a call on a Friday night coming back from Temple that night, like drops to her knees, screaming. We go to the hospital. He's in intensive care, cracks his orbital bone, but heals from that. Goes to college, feeling a pain in his knee. They do sports medicine tests. Those are negative. So they do blood tests. Cancer from childhood's come back. Now that it's come back, they have to give him a stronger dose of the chemo, which 10 years later, the chemo is now stronger, which is good. But the chemo, as much as it's lowering the white blood cell counts, is beating the shit out of all of his healthy cells. We're watching him get treatment. I'm up at college at this point. My father calls me, he's come down, drive down, meet us. Todd's got 105 fever. We're bringing him into the hospital. Neurologist meets us at the hospital. My brother is now tube breathing for him. I don't know what's going on. He's like, your brother's gone into septic shock from the chemo treatments. He's fallen into a coma, and we don't know if he's going to wake or ever have any brain activity, but it's your decision as a family whether you want to keep the tube breathing for him or not. We just can't promise anything. So that goes on for 3 months, like no movement whatsoever. Tube is just breathing for him. Miracle, after 3 months, he wakes, full cognitive faculties, but his kidneys fail from being in the septic shock for so long. So he needs to go on dialysis. We all get tested to see who's the closest match to him for a donor. My father donates a kidney. That's successful. I get that dream job at the NBA league office right out of college, thinking blank slate, real world is all behind me. And 3 of my close friends, 22, 23, 24, pass away back to back, guys that I went to high school with. So I share that because of what the doctor said back to me. She shared all that with me, and she goes, okay, Eric, we only have 10 minutes. What else happened to you as a child and a young adult that impacted your mental health that I need to know about? And I said, Don, I don't know what you're talking about. You asked me to tell you about my life. I started at age 9. I got up to age 24. I didn't have a chemical imbalance until I was 33 when I was working for the Panthers. There's a 9-year gap where I ran the sales departments for for the Suns, the Devils, and the Panthers, and I was completely fine. So what do you mean impacted by mental health? And she gave me an analogy, because when we were talking earlier of what it was like in Florida, and it felt like my brain, the plug just got pulled out from my brain computer. She said, okay, you had a front row seat, let's say for an NBA game, and you were watching these NBA athletes run across the court. People who are Knicks fans now, I was watching the game last night, right? So the 7-foot athletes, sweat's flying off them and hitting your suit, or they dive for a loose ball and they land in your lap. Your suit gets all sweaty. You go home after a 3-hour game, put the suit away for the dry cleaner, and now put on a nice new suit the next day after you shower. She said, you had a front row seat, but it wasn't for an NBA basketball game, it was for the game of life. And the game of life was represented by your brother in a muddy wrestling ring, and then eventually your friends in a muddy wrestling ring. You knew they were wrestling. It's not that you didn't know that, just like you knew the NBA game was taking place. But what you didn't know was that the mud was splattering and hitting you in the front row, just like the sweat from the NBA players. And that mud was caking up and building on you. And you were so focused on everything else in the arena that was going on. The Jumbotron, the LED lights, the music, which I came to realize was an analogy for being an athlete growing up and then working in sports. So my eye was off of the focus of what was happening to me in a vicarious way of what they were going through. And she said, you didn't just sit there for 3 hours like an NBA game, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, 30 years, 33 years, you've sat in the same seat. That mud is caked up and built on you. That mud is called chronic stress and trauma, and it's built in your nervous system and started to make physiological and biological changes to the connection between your brain and your body. To your apt question that you asked earlier, no one ever talked about your microbiome. No one ever talked about anything structurally in my body. Instead, they were all telling me chemicals or the neurons. That's it. Nothing about...
Without any organic proof, without scans, without anything. They were making up stories about what was happening in your brain. And then along comes this wonderful woman who gives you a new perspective. She validates your pain, your life experience. She allows you to express yourself totally authentically, and something shifted, it sounds like.
What shifted for me, because I think of the world in pictures. So she did a great job of giving me the wrestling analogy. My picture, my brain all of a sudden went to having a front row seat to watch other things happen to other people in your life. And you don't need to be the one that they're happening to directly. So then I go, take me out of the equation at 35. I go, take your average 15-year-old. And then all of a sudden, these things just started rolling off my tongue. And I was like, watch your parents get into fights and get a divorce. Watch your parents lose their job and lose a house. Watch your two best friends get in a fight and you're in the middle and you never speak to either of them again because they don't talk to each other. Watching your best friend being bullied or verbally abused in the schoolyard, or being sexually abused and they confide in you about it, or your friend dealing with the sickness of a loved one like my friend saw with me, or dealing with the loss of a loved one, or how about even being a child watching your parent deal with their sick older parent and their parent being in hospice. Like, I don't know a 15-year-old, let alone 35, 55-year-old or 85-year-old who hasn't been through one summer many of those things. If that's what mental health is, now this is all in the first session, in the last 10 minutes I'm saying this, I go, everyone's mental health is impacted, and that's not the narrative that's out there.
You have an epiphany moment right there where you realized that life is hard for everyone in different ways. It's affecting people in different ways. And therefore, everyone has an experience by way of mental health.
Yes. And she also, that's a great summary of it, but so two things happen. I haven't done any deep dive research into what I just described. That's just epiphany that came to me. So first she goes, I agree with you, but we have to help you get healthy first.
We're already ready to save the world.
I'm already like, what do you do to help people?
Oh my gosh.
So that's one.
That's interesting. You're always thinking of other people.
Part of it was also like, if I had been told to do things for my brain and my body as a kid, instead of just running stadium stairs and doing bench press because my coach told me to do that, if this had been the reality of our brain and body are impacted by chronic stress and trauma, I would have done other things because I listen to what coaches say. Like, that was what my entire childhood was of being an athlete. So part of it was like anger towards the system. Part of it was, how do we help other people? So it's like a mixture of those two. And so she sends me, she's like, calm down for a second. I'm sending you to a weekend breathing course. So I don't think, again, her course that she did with my parents was integrative breathing. So imagine the scene. I show up and I'm the only male, only one under 40, and only one born in this country. So it was me and 8 Indian women and 9 yoga mats. And I'm a complete fish out of water. And everyone's walking like all gracefully and hugging each other on their tiptoes. And, oh, it's so nice to see you, because they've all been in the same circles and been to these courses before. And I remember one of them going, I just want to see the world in high definition again. And we're going to get back to that. And I was like, the analogy in my mind was, I just want to see static on my TV. Give me some kind of some kind of visual that something's coming back.
She said she wants to see the world in high definition.
Yeah.
And you were like, just give me a sign that there's anything on TV.
Give me a sign, anything, because your reward center is so blunted that nothing matters to you. So you don't need to see the world in high, you just need to see something. And so in the course, I'm peppering the instructor with all these questions. I breathe every single day already. Why is breathing going to help me? But I start to learn about the vagus nerve in that course. And I'm sure you talk about it a lot in your podcast. And okay, this makes sense. If it's a carrier messenger that connects your brainstem, iterates in two different branches, one over the heart and the lungs and the other one down over the gut, this makes sense. And if I, as a little kid and then as a young adult, was constantly going, oh shit, my brother's going to be sick. Oh shit, what's the next thing that's going to happen? And all the what if scenarios, in addition to the actual events that happened, I was sending signals down to the rest of my body that something wasn't right. So I was conditioning myself. That was the mud that was caking up on me. Obviously, oversimplistic explanation, because that's just the vagus nerve and not the rest of the system. But that one understanding alone was like, all right, I'll buy into this rhythmic breathing pattern thing that creates greater vagal tone because I've lost vagal tone from the way that I've been breathing in this shallow, oh shit type of way for so long. And I do learn the exercise in the course. I feel no better in the 3 days we do the course. And we're all on this text message thread giving each other a pound that we did the 45-minute exercise each day following. And that what was asked to me was stick with it for 40 days. If you're not feeling better after 40 days, you can stop doing the exercise, but please just stick with it for 40 days. So 29 days in, I'm doing it. I'm not feeling any better. But I'm like, I'm a creature of do what I'm told. The 30th day I wake up, and two things came back to me when I woke up in the morning. I wanted to make scrambled eggs for breakfast, and I wanted to turn the TV on. And having a desire come back when I hadn't had any for 2.5 years was like Hanukkah night or Christmas morning, whatever anyone celebrates. So I realized, okay, there's something to this. All you need to start going on a mental health healing journey is the slightest bit of hope that something you're doing is projecting you into something that is working.
That was like a breadcrumb. There's progress right there. And that feeling of not having desire, if people are listening and they can identify, it's such an intense feeling.
That's the greatest drug in the world. There is hope, but I didn't have hope for 2.5 years. And now all of a sudden I've got hope. She sends me to a guy who was a psychiatrist, but an integrative psychiatrist from Columbia, Dr. Richard Brown, chair of the APA's Integrative Caucus. I don't know any of this at the time, other than he's someone who treats as something other than medication first. This is before I met all my partners. Dr. Brown decided to open up a slot for me at 5 a.m. because he was so fully booked. And he's listening to my stories I'm sharing. He's going, And I'm like, Dr. Brown, before I keep sharing more, I was like, does it really not matter what trauma I've been through in my life? Because it's trauma nonetheless, and that's impacted my system regardless. He's like, yeah, like he didn't want to, he's like, but just keep going. And so I'm like piecing these things together as he's just ahhing me and listening. But back to hope, where he ended that first session, he said, Eric, there's 15 things we can do to help you. And if those 15 don't work, there's 15 things after that. And if those 15 don't work, there's 15 things after that. So that was such a difference from what that Harvard doctor had told me at the hospital. Your last resort is having your brain shocked with the seizure. That was now motivation for me to go, okay, all those other kids that are 15 years old that I was thinking about, and the way that mental health is shared with us, and this doctor giving me hope, combine that together, we have to find a path towards helping people see that there's many options to work on your mental health proactively, that mental health lives across a continuum instead of it being you have it or you don't. And how do I get that message across? So I know you commented, this is everything on that post about the 1 in 5, 5 in 5 thing. I go to, I won't say the names of the charities because I don't want to talk them down, but let's just say the largest mental health charities in our world.
Okay, can we pause for 2 seconds? Because I just want to focus in on what you said. Talk about this 5 in 5. Your movement, SameHere Global, and you have the services that you also provide under the umbrella of 5 in 5. But that 5 in 5 number is because there is a myth, we can call it a myth if we're being generous, that 1 in 5 people will struggle with mental health. And what I love so much about your work is that you come from this marketing perspective and this PR perspective where you understand how to change people's minds. And you came on the scene and you saw this myth being totally perpetuated and you saw straight through it. Last week we spoke and I was mind blown by your explanation. So I would love for you just to talk about that now.
So my job when I was at the NBA, when you say I have a marketing background, my first job was to look at all the teams' websites and compare one website to the next. What's Orlando doing that we could help Milwaukee with? Because they're similar markets, even though they're in completely different parts of the country, size of the market, type of the fan base. Okay, so what am I going to do when I want to get in the mental health space? I wasn't thinking about getting into the mental health space. I was thinking about, I just came to understand mental health in this one way. if there's an organization out there, as I look at their websites, just like I did at the NBA, and compare one website to the next, if someone's talking about mental health the way that I just came to understand it, I've got connections with athletes and with teams that can help ramp up their messages to a higher place. This is 2017. No one's talking about these things back then. There's still not enough, but let's just say even less so back then. So I'm like, let me see one of the organizations that's talking about it this way, and I'll come and I'll hand off my connections to them, and I'll go back and be the guy who's back working in sports.
So your hope at that moment was that you would find an organization that would echo the same treatment that you had just gotten from this integrative doctor, from the breath therapy, the whole person care. You're hoping to find an organization that echoes those messages.
And in finding that organization, like, I don't know anything about the business side of nonprofits at this point. I've never run a nonprofit. When you work, like, as much as I had dream jobs, these are billionaire owners who, like, if you don't show up for work for 2 days, the business is going to fall apart. So the X isn't on your back. You're not an entrepreneur. You're working with large numbers and you're working with big brands, but you don't see the building a brand from scratch side of things that these nonprofits are, right? So I'm going on these websites and I'm comparing, and I'm doing exactly what I did at the NBA. Okay, what's their messages at the top of their sites? What are they leading people to in terms of solutions? And I see consistency across all of them, which you would think is a good thing. If the consistency was helping people get better, it was literally the antithesis of what I just learned from this integrative group of people. So the first message that was in there, which resonated with you, is they all started with the statistic 1 in 5 people are mentally ill. Now, here's what is the most nefarious thing about that message. If you want to take them as these kind, caring, giving organizations, you can go, look at what they're trying to do. They're trying to normalize mental health by telling people that 20% of people have a mental illness and you should look out for your mental health because you might be in that 20%, so be proactive about it. No, that's not what that number does. When you say 1 in 5, you're telling 80% of people, the other 4 in 5, you're healthy, fine, normal, and okay. And the reason I know that to be the case now is because I do programming daily, whether it's over the Zoom or in schools, and I go, here's my exercise. I'll tell my story, and then I go up, I always read energy. So I go up to 5 kids or 5 employees in an office that I can tell are a little timid that are sitting near each other. And I go, okay, I just told a very sensitive story. I want the 5 of you to stand up. And they're all like looking at each other. And I go, because I just told a very vulnerable story, I'm going to ask you all to tell a very vulnerable story to your coworkers or your classmates. Sometimes it's an assembly of 1,500 kids, and these kids are freaking out. So I go, you could sit down. You could sit. I have 4 of them sit down. Okay, and Ozzy's still standing up. So I'm like, go to the other kids. I go, how do you feel right now, the ones that are sitting down versus your friend Ozzy who's standing up? And they're like, relieved, not stressed anymore. I'm like, okay, how do you think Ozzy feels? On edge, nervous? Okay. So Ozzy and Eric are the 2 mentally ill people because in mental health, we're the 1 in 5. And I turn to the other 4 and I go, how would you describe your mental health if you're not in the 1 in 5 that Ozzy and I are? Because you have to define your mental health in some way. So if you're not in the 1 in 5, what are you? If you're not mentally ill? And I get the same 4 answers: healthy, fine, normal, and okay. No matter where I go. So
okay, so you just blew my mind with this story for another reason. From a marketing perspective, if you tell someone you're 1 in 5, you're telling them you are alone. You're 1. It's not you're the 20%, right?
Why do you think I'd make a person stand up by themselves in front of a whole group of people?
Saying right? You're the 20%, you'd have 20% of the audience stand up and they'd say, hey, we're together. That would at least be something. But saying they're literally saying you are alone.
In the 1 in 5s, there's depression, there's anxiety, there's PTSD, there's OCD. So they're not even saying you're part of the same 20% of people. To your point, if I had the 1 in 5 stand up here and he's got depression, the other 1 in 5 and he's got anxiety, the messages tell us that the anxiety and the depression person aren't the same group. They have separate things going on that's wrong with them. So there's no camaraderie, there's no support there because you don't understand what I've been through. I don't understand what you've been through.
Somehow their disorders are lifelong and genetic.
Yes, lifelong and genetic. And by the way, victimization and identity, you now become that label. You become that label because you think it gives you meaning and purpose. Oh, it explains why I feel the way that I feel. And then everyone else starts putting you in that category because they're like, Ozzy, please come to the guidance counselor's office. You now think, as your friend of Ozzy, she's got it. So we're putting these labels on people. So as I'm doing that, I'm like, there's got to be by design that these nonprofits that are funded by our government more than any other nonprofits that are out there in the mental health space all have the same 1 in 5 message. That can't be a mistake. And then I'm like, using my marketing brain going to place, I'm like, even if the message was 2 in 5, 3 in 5, let's even take it next further, 4 in 5, you still are creating a binary understanding. When you tell people that some people have it and some people don't, I'm in the 20%. If it's 4 out of 5, I'm in the 20% 90% that don't because that label doesn't resonate with me. So what they've done is they have the perfect marketing message. When I say they, the pharmaceutical industry, who are some of the donors to these nonprofit organizations. Oh, surprise. Okay. So what does that do now? Okay. That gets the funnel of patients as wide as possible. What do I mean by that? If you create a dividing line between the 1 in 5s and the 4 in 5s, the 1 in 5 have it. When you have it, go back to strep throat bronchitis pneumonia, what medication fixes it? If you're in the 4 in 5, what are you told? You don't have it. So what do you do when you don't have it? You don't work on it. Look at the numbers of people who go to therapy. It's only 10% of our population. 90% of people are doing no proactive work in mental health. You're never going to get 100%, but the fact that 90% they're not doing. So they've created the perfect funnel system for if you're over the line, you do something, which you get the meds. And if you're not over the line, you're reactive, you wait, and eventually you go over that line. So they've created a funnel system for 100% of the population to eventually get sick and need what they're selling. And it's so.
I hear what you're saying, like the 20%, there's something wrong with them, the genetic, lifelong brain disorder. And then the other 4 and 5, it's like, nothing's wrong with you. Don't worry about this thing. When in reality, human beings have a propensity as human beings to experiencing mental health challenges. Everybody. But because they think they're the 4 and 5, they're immune, they don't even acknowledge it. And then that's a risk factor.
Wow. And now the second marketing message that was on those websites that took it even further, all the normalization campaigns are an action word followed by stigma. Stop the stigma, stop the stigma, break the stigma, erase the stigma. I'm in sports, so I watch what the leagues are doing now. Baseball has strike out the stigma. Hockey has slapped the stigma. Volleyball has slammed the stigma. Football has kicked the stigma. What does the term stigma mean? It means human beings. It's not my water bottle. It's not my phone because these are inanimate objects. Human beings are forming unfair opinions and judgments about other human beings. You cannot say stop the stigma without it sounding like you're pointing the finger at a group of people who are making those opinions about your group of people who are the sick people. That takes a binary understanding and it points and it makes them go even further apart. So those people who think they don't have it and are not proactively working on it, it makes them even work on it less and go, I'm out completely. You're now blaming me. You can't just scream stop the stigma and it goes into the ether. It lands on people. When people go on social media and they see stop the stigma campaigns, but they're not a part of mental health advocacy, how do you think they're internalizing that message? It's got to be directed at someone.
Yeah. How do people who don't necessarily identify with mental health or people who even know that it's an issue, when they see stop the stigma, it sounds to me a little bit as a parent, like saying to my kid, don't pick up the knife and play with it.
Yes. Which is, it's amazing that your brain went there because sometimes when people press me on this, I go, what happens when you have a 2-year-old and they're throwing a toy and you go, Jimmy, stop throwing that toy. First thing he does is pick up the toy and throw it again. So like when you're telling people to stop doing something, even if they're heeding your message and listening to it, they're going to combat it and do the opposite. Like I hate stop bullying campaigns for that reason also. The way that you bring people together.
I hear what you're saying in terms of mental health, in terms of making this about a shared experience, because most people are followers, not leaders. We have data on that. So if I'm a follower and I hear this stop the stigma, I'll get scared and I'll think, oh no, there's a stigma. I better not talk about my mental health because, oh shoot, there's a stigma and I'll be the 1 in 5. And then the fear kicks in. And then what does that do? That creates more mental health issues. So we've got a problem, Houston. This is a serious, serious brainwash.
Is it possible that problem is a purposeful problem because it keeps the system going?
I'm sure it is. The video now, what are the leading causes of death for people under the age of 44? It's all written on the CDC website. And this has changed over time. Now it's accidental death with a large proportion of those being overdose. And then second to that is shocking suicide. And that is not new. That has actually coincided with all of these movements growing and coincided with the pharmaceutical industry expansion. So we have a worsening problem. And I think this is a perfect turning point to your movement now, because you took your whole story, you saw the dark side and you're doing something about it.
Yeah, like the building of it was initially, okay, I've got these relationships with athletes. What I'm finding in terms of partnering with another nonprofit doesn't exist because there's no one out there talking about it this way. And so there's a gentleman, Theo Fleury, who's an NHL hockey player, like probably one of the 50 greatest of all time. And I saw him out there before any of these athletes were talking about mental health in an open way. He was sharing that he was sexually abused at 15 years old by his male coach.
That is so.
It's not as big of a deal in America, but like I'm reading this, I'm like, this dude's actually being willing to be open about what happened to him. Okay, I got to get in touch with this guy. I write him on LinkedIn. He writes back to me. We have this awesome conversation, and he tells me this story about writing his book, Playing with Fire. and this homeless looking dude is crutching the book like it's a baby and just like walks up and puts the book down in front of him, looks him in the eyes and just says, "Me too." Now, he shares this with me, and this is before the whole Alyssa Milano movement. I get the chills as I'm hearing this. I'm like, Theo, that guy said 1,000 words to you by only saying 2 words. And Theo's, yeah, why do you think I've been in this space for as long as I have? Because that dude's strength showed me how many people this can impact. So I was like, Theo, would you join me? Because we need to create a movement of people sharing what they've been through, not what label they have. And like, you're the only athlete that I've seen sharing what you've been through. I'll do the hard work of calling other athletes that I'm either directly connected with or tangentially connected with to explain that I'm looking them to talk about the divorces that they lived through and the job losses and how they got cut from teams and how that impacted them over time more so than the labels that they have. So he jumped in early because he told me the Me Too thing. I went to the American Sign Language website because again, I think visually and I see this signal of your hand like gesturing like this. You and I were the same. So friend of mine, like my thumb at me and my pinky point at you back and forth. And so what you're saying there is back to the 5 and 5 message. We're all the same. Like no matter what we've been through, we've all been through things. So as we're creating this logo with this art designer that I went to high school with and doing it for me for free, Alyssa Milano comes out with her campaign. I call up Theo. I'm like, hey, I know your story says Me Too, but I got to look for something else because that's all about sexual abuse. And so I find the synonym for it, which is SameHere. Nicely, same is a lot more collaborative. There's a lot more alliteration off the S.
Yeah.
Okay, we start creating the SameHere movement. And the first year of operation was just getting athletes on our website to like story about what they've been through. And you're able to create social posts. And this is the insidious part of social media. In about a 3-month period, we gained 70,000 followers. We didn't pay a dime for it. Just we use the term, we're all a little crazy. Like it's a little edgy, but it was crazy and like making tongue in cheek. Like hey, that cup that you're drinking probably tastes crazy cold. I'm not saying your cup is mentally ill.
A term of endearment.
Endearment, exactly.
Yeah.
It was resonating with people. And all of a sudden, Facebook just cut the plug on it, meaning we put a post up and it would reach 85 people. Like you could just tell, like, yeah. So I'm seeing that. The same things happen with me on Instagram, like with 35,000, they show it to 400 people, right? So I'm realizing like we've got a code here that's working, but like advocacy through social media is not going to get wide enough the way that we need it to, because who are their biggest advertisers? It's the pharmaceutical industry. They don't want this message normalized. Who do I see whose messages get wide is if you're ADHD or bipolar Bonnie. They love that message going viral because it gets more people going, I may have it. Let me go to the doctor and get the medication for it. But when you talk about it in a normalized way of how everyone goes through something, they do not want that message out there at all. I think you and I discussed this. Even the large accounts like the holistic psychologist, she plays the game really well. And she goes, father wounds. This is what happens when your father's done this to you. Okay, you call yourself the holistic psychologist. She does beautiful, amazing things. But at the same time, you're pointing fingers going, hey, everyone who's upset with their dad, here's something to share, to point fingers at your dad so you could put it on your wall to go, see, Dad, you're the reason why I went through what I went through. And now this woman, Nicole, in her healing circle, she's going to help me feel better. That breaks society apart more instead of bringing us together. And it gets her more sales, which is great. I think what she does is she plays the game really well in that she's the holistic. She put up a post today about depression is a symptom. It's not a disorder. That's a great message. We want that. But she puts in the divisive, polarizing ones because that's what gets the algorithm going. So she knows how to.
I hear what you're saying. So basically, if we want to do better on social media, we need to start blaming people.
That is exactly what I'm saying. There's a post out there of Jim Carrey, and he's like doing his walk, like his head to the side during Ace Ventura. It's literally a 3-second video that goes, a real video of me going to therapy because my parents didn't. That is the definition of being divisive, because you're going to put that on your wall, which is a knock on your parents. And then your parents go, I can't believe they're outing us in that way, that they're saying that we're the reason why they feel the way that they feel. That doesn't help us come together. That separates us further. And if you want to go viral on social, there's clear formulas to do it on mental health. That's how you do it. I just think you're an awful human being when you do that. And I'm sorry, that sounds like a very blunt thing to say, but to separate people for your own benefit or your own pocket, your own wallet, like I will never do that. I don't believe in that. So that built into then doing programmatically, like getting out there and going, okay, we have these 5 years. Because when you were talking about organizations getting out there and doing things, again, not trying to name specific organizations, there's a lot of groups that go, here's our mental health programming. It's an 8-hour intensive. You're not going to learn enough about mental health in a one sitting thing. You need to come back and there needs to be ongoing programming where one concept builds off the next. It's digestible. We break it down, each pillar, into 3 delivery mechanisms. There's a presentation, a workshop, and then an implementation session. So you learn the concepts through the person presenting. You then sit together in groups and you use those concepts together in an activity. Then you take that activity and you go, I'm a teacher. How would I bring that in the classroom? I'm a manager in an office. How would I bring that into my team and into my group? When you do that and then you engage with these groups where you come in once a month or once every other month, and each one of the concepts builds off the next, and you learn what is common language in mental health. How do we check in with each other? What are exercises that I can do to work on my nervous system? Why is my nervous system?
How do we check in with each other? I like that.
That, like, our scale is based off of polyvagal concepts. The check-in, this is, again, like, hopefully this is a wow moment for other people. If I ask you, how are you, Ozzy? Your answer to me is a non-answer. Talk about needing to change narratives. So there was a two or 3 years ago, if you remember, there was a really large campaign that said, how are you doing, comma, then really was written in really big words with a big question mark. So the person's not answering you already, but now if we put a spotlight on your face and go, tell me really how you're doing, that's going to get them to answer. It's so backwards what we're doing. We saw, okay, mental health lives on this continuum. The continuum is polyvagal, where the nervous system goes from parasympathetic and sympathetic balance, sympathetic overload, and then what I experience, shutdown, because you've been in sympathetic overload for too long. Why are we not explaining that continuum to people to understand how their states of mind move over time?
So essentially, it's like explaining to people that humans have a natural stress response that is built into us for our survival.
Yes.
And so in your explaining that, you're communicating already that we're all in this together.
Yes.
We're all susceptible and we can all learn skills to be more resilient.
Language first before skills, because of this. Back to the 1 and 5, 4 and 5. If I normalize a conversation in pillar 1 saying we all go through things, but the entry point to we all go through things is now do exercises about them. There's no indicator early on of that I go through things too, and I'm at a place where maybe I should do things about it right now. Because let's be honest, pain points for human beings is what makes us do things. Every other area of health, you step on a scale and your weight's gone up or gone down. You put a thermometer in your mouth and your temperature's gone up and down. You take a blood test and your blood sugar or inflammation levels or enzyme levels have gone up or down. You put a blood pressure cuff on you, your blood pressure's gone up or down. Everything is a range. And then when you're out of range, the doctor says, you better start doing this, and you do it. Okay. Or if you're doing it on your own, it's not a doctor. You step on the scale, you go, I don't like that I gained 5 pounds. Let me get to the gym. We don't teach people that with mental health. So when you ask us about the technology, our technology is not called Gym for the Brain, even though we trademark that term. Our technology is called SameHere Scale, because we need the entry point to be that people understand that there's a common language, even if they're not using it with other people as a starting point and they're just using it to track their own. There needs to be a common language to go, how am I moving? I would have loved to have known as a little kid that my brain going, that ambulance is going to be at my house. That ambulance is going to be at my house every time I'm playing basketball and there's an ambulance going by. That's not a healthy thought. That means that my fight, flight, sympathetic response is heightened because I'm always worrying about the worst because the worst has happened before. No one taught me that because no one teaches anyone that. Because I played basketball every weekend that I had free time from sunrise to sunset, Saturday and Sunday. Our park was 2 miles away from my house. There's 15,000 other houses in our town. But when an ambulance went by on the main road, my brain was going, I got to prepare for when I get home that there's going to be an ambulance that's there because it had happened before.
Oh my God. Your whole story, and we can talk about it later. I identify so strongly. My brother also got in an accident, almost died in high school. It's so real and it happens to everyone. So when you come in, you do your training, you create this common language with the SameHere scale. People learn how to assess their own nervous system according to the scale.
Yes. That's pillar 2. That's pillar 2. Pillar 3 is then what structures in the body start to get impacted when you stay to the right for too long on the scale. So if we introduce the common language, we then have to explain what losing vagal tone means, what the HPA axis being turned on and now having cortisol running throughout our body and having chronic systemic inflammation and the gut becoming porous because of the chronic systemic inflammation, dysbiosis and leaky gut. And what does that mean? And you can't create neurotransmitters as a result because of what's happening in your gut. But even if in that session, there's one takeaway from that session, because they don't understand any of that science that I just shared, the one takeaway is what you live through in your life creates physiological and biological changes in your body. Now we've got them because they go, oh, so I can do something about healing those parts of my body. It's not a chemical imbalance or a gray cloud that lives above me. It's actual changes to my body. I can do something about it. And compare that, Ozzy, to other organizations. You go and you get a training for 8 hours. Let's learn the signs to look out for when someone has depression. Let's learn the signs when someone has anxiety. That's not helping us heal at our source. That's doubling down on the same existing erroneous messages.
Reinforcing a broken system. So God bless you, because you are doing such important work. I could talk to you forever.
So the fourth and the fifth pillars. Fourth is, we all grew up with the assembly programs, Just Say No to Drugs. Think about how narrow that focus was.
Don't play with the knife. It's the same thing.
Exactly. And it was like, they only talked about drugs. They didn't talk about any other maladaptive coping mechanisms. And if you didn't do drugs, you tuned that 1 hour assembly. So our fourth pillar is, if our physiological and biological changes are happening from the chronically stressful and traumatic life events that we've been through, why do we turn to things like shopping and gambling and sex and hoarding and vaping and cutting and burning? Now, when you start to learn, oh, I do that because it's a distraction mechanism or a cover up to the pain that I'm feeling. That's this thing called emotional pain that we all feel.
It's like a mechanism, right?
Yes. It shocks people when I say it, but I go, every single one in this room is addicted to something. We're all addicts. Like, the story of Matthew Perry dying because he's an addict makes it seem like there's addicts and then everyone else who's not an addict. It's not the reality. And I raise my hand to be self-deprecating. And also I go, I'm a workaholic because I get a dopamine hit from staying up till 2 a.m. when it's important emails that I got to answer. And that's an escapism because I'm not being with myself and being in nature or enjoying my time with people. So that allowed me, because accomplishment was how I learned to not have to deal with what my brother was going through. It was a learned behavioral pattern that allowed
you ran into like achievement as a distraction, and that soothed you because it was an escape.
Exactly. So how is that any different than drinking alcohol, which is, okay, alcohol gets damned more. I get patted on the back for what I do. That makes it even more insidious that people are like, keep doing that. You're the hardest worker. You're the first one in the office, the last one out. Meanwhile, I'm falling apart as a human being because I'm not working on myself. So it's not going to give me cirrhosis of the liver, but it's probably going to give me an earlier crash of my brain, and then maybe fibromyalgia, and then maybe diabetes, and maybe heart disease eventually, right? So we're applauding the escapism. So we help people understand where they fit in the escapism puzzle, so that finally the fifth pillar is, what can I do about it? And that's where we came up with Gym for the Brain. STAR, it's an acronym, it stands for Stress and Trauma, Active Release and Rewiring. And this is dumb luck that I just started reaching out to the either inventors or lead researchers in these non-medication modalities. So Stephen Hayes from ACT Therapy, and Dr. David Berselli from TRE, and Amy Weintraub, who wrote the book Yoga for Depression back in the 80s. Who was thinking of this stuff back then? You can't obviously find the inventor of yoga because that person's not alive, but you can find
also have Stephen Porges, who's the expert on vagus nerve. You really found the source people for these modalities.
I needed to, because I'm only a guy, right? Like, I'm just a person who's been through things. And even if I was a doctor, people could be like, oh, he's a quack, right? What they talk about doctors who talk holistically. Yep. So why is STAR called STAR? Because my marketing message to these other practitioners who had invented these or done the research was, you guys are getting called one of four things at least, that are moving you away from being mainstream. And that's Eastern, functional, holistic, or alternative. And when you're put into that category,
Eastern, functional, holistic or alternative. And then so the mainstream has been taught to call those all quackery. And that's because of,
like, as big as the holistic psychologist account has come, isn't the default in people's mind to go, oh, she treats in that other type of way, instead of being like, she treats to get to the source. Like, it should be called, instead of alternative, it should be treatment, but we call
it's really interesting, right? Because so many of those names have been pigeonholed, and there is a reason why. And it does go back to the early 1900s, and it's economic, and the medical schools were brainwashed to call everything natural quackery in order to promote medication. I do think there's progress. I think there's movement in that area, but I think it's brilliant of you to use a different word. I myself have been working with that, like in terms of the book, I'm calling it whole person healing.
It's amazing.
Root cause identification. But you're so right.
It's sad that it takes having to, it's a fun puzzle, to your point about opportunity. It's a fun puzzle to try to figure out of what's going to resonate with people. But I also know though like we talked about investments and stuff like that, it's going to be a build to get the normalization to be there, because to spread it out when you've got the powers that be who've been in place for so long, who make money on the system being broken and that's not being understood, you're fighting an uphill battle. If you have the right terminology from the beginning that resonates with people, it's just who's the next organization I can partner with. To your point about going out to Israel, we went out to South Korea to work with our military. It was amazing.
So what does STAR stand for?
STAR, stress and trauma, active release and rewiring.
Stress and trauma, active release and rewiring. Brilliant.
And I can't take credit for so one of the women who's on that alliance, Kim Barthel, she's world renowned in occupational therapy and healing at the source also. So I was like, Kim, what exactly are we doing when we do these exercises? She's like, you're releasing, rewiring the trauma, the stress that's built in your system. And so my brain just goes into, you can't sit around and passively do it. There's activities you need to do. So there became my A that I needed and the vowel to put together a bunch of consonants together. And that's where STAR was created. And so it was like, wow, STAR's uplifting. Like kids can learn STAR. You're getting a STAR in school. So let's call it that. And then we paired the gym for the brain with it so that people could be like, wait, I work out for my body and different things work for Ozzy when she goes and work for me. It doesn't have to be a one size fits all. We try these different pieces of equipment at the gym. Why can't it be the same thing with mental health as opposed to management and talk therapy?
So spot on. I love it. I found your work in the research I was doing for the book, and it was such a bright spot. If we're talking to lay people, where can anyone who is or is not struggling go to learn these skills? And then also for our professionals and institutions, what you can help them with as well.
In wanting to make it digestible for people, we created an app called SameHere Scale. So it's on any of the app stores. So SameHere is one word, then new word scale. There's a scale to check in on to understand your nervous system states based off of polyvagal. And then there's exercises to do with cards and visuals. What's also getting added is body parts. So people will learn this is working on the vagus nerve and it's blinking and it shows the vagus nerve. And not just that it's working on it, what does it mean to improve vagal tone, right? Why does a certain breath pattern work on that? So think of it as a gym for the brain in your pocket that you can track and trend yourself over time. So we have it in the military, we have it with sports teams, we have it in schools where there's check-ins that can be done. One click of a button, you can check in with your 30 students or your 500 athletes or whatever the number is, and you get reports and trends and you get alerts and all that fun stuff. So the app, I would say, is a starting point. On our website, 5and5inc.com, that shows the different ways that you can engage with us, having us out to do the programming work. We do it in 5 main areas: K through 12s, colleges, corporate offices, sports teams and leagues, and then service departments, though we've gone outside of those 5 as well. And then the trainings probably was the one that you were asking about with the professionals. So if you want just like an at-home self-paced, we have a STAR certification course. It's 22 modules, 16 hours. It's taught by Dr. Porges, Dr. Vincent Folletti, the chair of the ACE study for diverse childhood experiences. Stephen Hayes is in it. Amy Weintraub from Accelerated Resolution Therapy. Prudence Farrow from Transcendental Meditation. Like, it's the science leading to then what do I do about it? So you get this nice certificate, STAR certification when it's over. And then finally, what we're getting into now is these trainings in a formal way, hands-on. We finally trained our first hospital, Central Florida Behavioral Hospital. Wow. It's so exciting to me because for people to go to the hospital and not have to just sit around and get medication and then perseverate in their own head. The stories that we are getting, Ozzy, from techs who are learning how to do a breathing pattern with someone and they're averting crisis. Hey, sit with me. Come on. We're going to do this breath work together. Hey, sit with me. We're going to do this havening exercise together. And they're coming back to us with these stories where they're now practically going, we want to market this into our community that we're STAR certified and trained. What's the licensing agreement we can do with that? It's pretty cool to think that like we went from training schools and offices just to have more skills to in a clinical setting is being brought there.
So how do you feel? How do you feel today after your whole journey and where you're sitting and what you're doing?
I'm a very honest person because like you said, like we're pleasantry when we're how we're doing. I think when you sprain your ankle really badly, you're susceptible to one bad cut on the field and your ankle gets sprained really badly again, even when you've done a lot of physical therapy to strengthen it back up. So I go through stretches where I have 3 weeks at a time and I'm great and I'm flying high. I'm like, oh, I got over this mental health thing. And then no major reason for something major happened, I crash. Happened to me last night. Had a weekend. My mom was in the hospital for a little bit, pneumonia. Oh, where does my brain go to? What might happen? What might happen? I'm in the hospital with her. She's out of the hospital now. But when I finally have time to just relax and watch the Knicks game, what does my brain do? All right, you've been through too much, shutting you off. Does that mean that I have more healing work to do? Probably. But I also have 30 some odd years of buildup of how my nervous system was revved up in a difficult way to overcome. So I'm okay that I have these peaks and valleys, and having the scale scale as a tool for me makes me go, it's not the end of the world the way it felt like when you went through it the first time. You're just going through a period of this right now. You can work your way out of this.
I love your honesty and that you're so real about it. I would be surprised if everyone listening didn't relate.
Thank you. So I think of when I'm sharing, there's two different groups of people in my mind. There's the people who like breath of fresh air, honesty, openness. We need to heal at the source. This is really great. And then there's a group of people who listen, probably not your audience because your audience is coming to you for this type of thing. But if I'm in an assembly program and there's kids there, or I'm in an office, there's going to be the second group of people who are like, I'm not listening to a word this guy says. Why? Because they don't want to look in the mirror because it's hard work to do. And when you share transparently, they're forced, because we have these mirror neurons, to go, wait, loss of a family member? Wait, sickness of a family member? Wait, family member in the hospital? And then all of a sudden it clicks for them, like, he's sharing some of my story. And then it forces them to go, this maybe does apply to me. And they don't like that because it makes them feel uncomfortable. So just know, to those people who feel that way, I don't mind being the bad guy, because if it shakes you into doing some of the work, I'm happy that I'm the bad guy in that way, because I don't want to see you have heart disease and diabetes and major depressive disorder.
Yeah, you're saving lives. It's for the sake of saving lives. And it's interesting too, because I've started to wonder if people assume, if they see my book, Mental Health Reclaimed, that I'm parodying the same messages that all these big organizations are parodying, and go get drugs and go do therapy, like the two things people talk about. And that is not the model. It's not about pointing fingers and calling names and labeling. It's absolutely, to me, and this is why I love your work so much, it's about recognizing the vulnerability of our humanity and not being afraid of our emotions or our human experiences, and not labeling them so that people fear them more, pathologize them, and then it becomes this divisive, broken society. And that's the society that you're fixing with the work you're doing.
Thank you for that. One. Two, on your book title, because it's important for people to hear it.
So I was going to call the book Defying the Diagnosis. And what happened was I started discovering more and more on diagnoses in general, and then diagnostic inflation, how diagnoses are being handed out like in M&Ms, drugs like M&Ms, diagnoses everywhere. And I asked myself, I just had this moment where I was like, wait a second, do I want to add wood to that fire? Do I want to acknowledge their system of name calling? Do I want to even validate that? Absolutely not. So I changed the title and I called it Mental Health Reclaimed instead. And
does it have a subtitle underneath Mental Health Reclaimed?
Reclaimed is a simple guide to thriving beyond labels or limits.
Okay, so you are like poking the bear on the system because of that.
There's also this idea that you and I have been down the rabbit hole and we know how dark it is and we have the data and we have the facts. But if people don't have that and they hear us talking about it, they suddenly think we're conspiracy theorists.
Yes.
And they'll write us off. It has been such a pleasure having you today. Is there anywhere specifically our listeners should go?
Social channels, like on Instagram, we're probably the most active. And then Twitter is at SameHere_Global, which I think might show up on the screen anyway.
All right, you got it. Thank you everyone for tuning in.